Donald Trump posted 2 words about the new pope. Totally disrespectful. Within weeks, Catholic approval of his administration had dropped 7 points. Several American dioceses reported attendance surges their bishops attributed directly to the conflict. The immune response had already begun, and Trump didn't even know he'd triggered it. This is not a political story. This is a pattern, and the state has never permanently won it. The mechanism is always the same. The state wields hard power, armies, law, fiscal control. The church wields something the state cannot match, a mandate that exists outside temporal law. When Pope Gregory VII declared in the 11th century that the Roman Church was founded by God alone and that the Pope held exclusive power to depose emperors, he was not making a theological argument. He was deploying a weapon. Excommunication did not threaten a ruler's body. It released his subjects from their oaths of allegiance. It made his army question whether their eternal salvation was worth their earthly loyalty. When Holy Roman Emperor Henry IV stood barefoot in the snow at Canossa in 1077, begging the Pope's forgiveness to save his throne, he was not performing piety. He was acknowledging that his military power had been neutralized by a spiritual one. No sword had been drawn. The Church had simply reframed the question, and the Emperor had no answer. That is the weapon, not an army, not a law, a framing that turns the state's own subjects against it before a single soldier moves. For 1,700 years, every ruler who attempted to subordinate the Roman Catholic Church to state authority succeeded only in weakening themselves. Trump's war of words with Pope Leo XIV is not a modern political dispute. It is the latest iteration of a pattern the state has never permanently won. Policy debates are winnable. Moral framings are not. Bismarck understood this least of all. In 1871, he launched the Kulturkampf, a struggle for civilization, he called it, passing the May Laws to secularize German education and break the Catholic Center Party. His framing was administrative. The Church was a political threat to imperial consolidation. The papacy under Pius IX reframed it immediately as persecution. The Church declared the laws invalid, invoking divine order. Bismarck's own Protestant conservative allies, fearing state overreach into their schools, began siding with the Catholics. The policy war was won. The narrative war was lost. Bismarck reversed his own laws within a decade. Napoleon made the same error with greater force and greater consequences. In 1809, he kidnapped Pope Pius VII, transporting him to Fontainebleau to break his resistance to the French Empire's continental system. Napoleon held the most powerful army in the world. He treated the Pope as a stubborn subordinate to be disciplined. He did not understand that by imprisoning the Vicar of Christ, he had handed the Church its most powerful narrative in a century. When the French were defeated in 1814 and Pius VII returned to Rome, he returned not as a prisoner but as a hero of the faith. Napoleon left the stage. The papacy's moral authority over the faithful was greater than before he had touched it. Here is what is rarely discussed. The Church does not merely survive these attacks, it emerges stronger from them. State aggression functions as an immune response. The virus triggers antibodies that consolidate and fortify the institution. Bismarck's Kulturkampf, designed to crush the Center Party, doubled its popular vote. The Catholic laity, forced to defend their church through electoral politics, learned democracy. The Center Party remained a dominant force in German politics for 60 years, a direct product of the man who tried to destroy it. Napoleon's assault on the papacy triggered ultramontanism, a sweeping centralization of papal authority that stripped away the local European customs and monarchical dependencies that had constrained Rome for centuries. The imprisonment of Pius VII produced the most administratively powerful papacy of the 19th century. Even Henry VIII's schism, which severed England from Rome entirely, forced the Roman Church to define itself with new precision through the Counter-Reformation. Every attack sharpened the institution it was meant to destroy. The election of Robert Prevost as Pope Leo XIV was, in Trump's own telling, a geopolitical calculation. The cardinals, the president claimed, selected an American because they thought that would be the best way to deal with him. This is the most revealing statement in the entire conflict and the most historically illiterate. Trump viewed the papacy through the lens of Westphalian nationalism. He assumed a Chicago-born man would carry Chicago loyalties into the Vatican. What he failed to understand is that the papacy has spent 17 centuries perfecting the art of stripping national identity from its leaders and reclothing them in the institutional logic of the universal church. Robert Prevost did not bring American policy preferences to Rome. He brought Rome's 2,000-year-old moral sovereignty to bear on American foreign policy. When Leo XIV describes the Iran war as a product of a delusion of omnipotence, he is not speaking as a liberal Democrat from Illinois. He is deploying a theological anthropology that classifies state aggression as a spiritual pathology, a framework that predates the United States by nearly 2 millennia. Trump's assumption of a client-patron relationship that he installed Leo and Leo owes him is a precise echo of every ruler who has made the same mistake. Henry IV believed the church depended on imperial patronage. Napoleon believed French military dominance made Rome a satellite. In each case, the ruler discovered that the institutional logic of the papacy overrides any personal or national debt. The church is not a client. It has never been a client, and every ruler who treated it as one eventually discovered this at enormous cost to their own authority. The pattern in the Trump case is now executing on schedule. His attack language, weak on crime, terrible for foreign policy, catering to the radical left, attempts to categorize the papacy as a domestic political faction, a move structurally identical to Bismarck's framing of the church as a threat to imperial consolidation. Leo XIV's response is textbook papal counter-strategy. Refuse to engage on policy terrain, reframe every challenge as a question rooted in the gospel, and let the moral framing do its work on the faithful. Trump won the Catholic vote 55 to 43% in 2024. Catholic approval of his administration has since dropped to 48%. Several American dioceses are reporting record numbers of converts and attendance surges that their bishops attribute directly to the Pope's moral opposition to the war and the deportation campaign. The immune response has begun. The president's attempt to invoke simony, his claim that he gave the church billions during COVID, as if financial patronage purchases institutional loyalty, mirrors Henry IV's belief that, because the church depended on imperial resources, it could be subordinated. The church's answer then was the same as its answer now. Its fundamental allegiance is not to the hand that feeds it. This is not a religious story. It is a story about institutional survival versus individual political power. The papacy does not win by defeating its enemies, it wins by outlasting them. Napoleon left the stage. Bismarck reversed his laws. Stalin's Soviet Union collapsed. The church is still here. Trump is fighting a narrative war against an institution that measures time in centuries and has never permanently lost one. The Pope will not debate him on policy. He will reframe the conflict as a moral question, hold the line, and wait. The ruler will eventually leave the stage. The church will still be here.